Welcome, everyone, to this week's edition of Military Trailblazer Office Hours. Thanks so much for taking time out of your Wednesday evening to spend it here in the spirit of community, mentorship, and, of course, learning. I am your host, David Nava. I'm a lead solution engineer at Salesforce and a military trailblazer. Each week, we invite a co-host, or sometimes 8 co-hosts, as is the case tonight, to take part in the conversation so we can leverage their experience, their expertise, and their unique perspectives. The focus for tonight's session is exploring government consulting roles at Salesforce. So if you've ever wondered what it's like to work in a tech consulting role within the public sector, this is the session for you. I'd like to welcome and briefly introduce our co-host panel for tonight's session. Courtney Tandeciarz is a Vice President of Public Sector Services at Salesforce. She has over 15 years of program execution and IT transformation experience, and was most recently a Public Sector Senior Director before making the move to Salesforce earlier this year. Larry Dillard is a Vice President of Public Sector Professional Services at Salesforce. He has over 20 years of experience leading large organizations and served in the Army for 27 years with the Corps of Engineer, retiring as a colonel. Lauren Zolp is a 14-time certified manager of solution consulting at Salesforce. She served in the Air Force as a linguist and is a proud Marine Corps spouse. Lauren, as you can tell, is also a Golden Hoodie Award recipient. Justin Piehowski is a senior solution architect and marketing cloud advisor at Salesforce. Fun fact, Justin is actually currently supporting the Academy Awards with Marketing Cloud, which is pretty neat. He served in the Minnesota Army National Guard for 8 years as an infantry soldier and journalist. Cece Adams is a 22-time certified solution architect at Salesforce. She has over 10 years of call center and Salesforce consulting experience and is a third-generation Army veteran, having served in the New York Army National Guard as a paralegal. Dennis O'Connell is a senior solution consultant at Salesforce. Dennis made the move to Salesforce earlier this year after transitioning from the U.S. Coast Guard, having served for 30 years and retiring as a Master Chief. Charles Scott is also a senior solution consultant at Salesforce. Charles is also a professional life and leadership coach who started his own business, which is Forged Coaching LLC, after retiring from the U.S. Coast Guard with 20 years of service earlier this year. And Hugh is a senior solution consultant at Salesforce. Hugh served in the Marine Corps for 5 years before transitioning to the trucking industry. He spent the next 15 years in trucking before moving to the Salesforce ecosystem with the help of the Talent Stacker program. It is awesome to have all of you here co-hosting office hours with me. Welcome.
Thank you, David.
Glad to be here.
Thank you.
Thanks. Excited to be here.
Awesome to have you. All right. Well, we'll keep going because we've got lots of great questions. Before we do launch into the questions, I always like to briefly explain the purpose of office hours before we open the floor for folks that may be attending for the first time. And I do see some new faces out there, which is always awesome. So these sessions are an informal get-together for gathering with military trailblazers as well as allies. Absolutely everyone is welcome to attend, to explore primarily non-technical Salesforce career and branding related topics in order that we can help you achieve your professional development and career related goals. So this next hour is intended to be an opportunity for collaborative mentorship. Everyone on the call is encouraged to step up and both ask and answer questions from your perspective, which of course will provide additional diversity of experience to the answers given, and that's what we're after. So during the session, please do keep an eye on the chat window. I and others on the call typically share a lot of great information, including learning, networking, and employment opportunities. You are also cordially invited to share your LinkedIn profile, and everyone can do that. You can connect back and forth because we always need to be branding. If you'd like to ask a question at any point during today's session, it is your session, please feel free to do so. And if you don't feel comfortable speaking up, no big deal. You can post your questions in chat and I will do my best to answer them, as well as the hands raised in the order that I see them. Finally, last bit of admin information. Tonight's session is being recorded. So if you'd like to share an attribution-free comment, please let me know before speaking and I can make sure it's edited out of the final recording. All right, so we will go ahead and get started and get it kicked off. So I want to provide some context for public sector services and government consulting before we get started. Could you provide, my awesome panel of 8, could you provide an overview of the value that Salesforce provides within this industry? For example, like how do we help our public sector customers succeed?
Yeah, absolutely. I will take a stab at that and then team, please pile on. So the first thing I'll say is that public sector at Salesforce is an interesting name for the business that we are doing, because within our public sector business, we do have US, federal, state, and local customers in US and Canada, but we also have our entire education business and our entire nonprofit business. So when you are serving a customer in Salesforce public sector, you are serving a mission-driven customer that spans our government consulting careers and also some other industries as well. And you'll hear some of those stories and experiences. This is why Justin ended up serving the Academy Awards. So I think at the core of what we do, we are helping citizens connect with the services that they need most, right? And sometimes that takes the shape of engaging with state or local government. Sometimes that's engaging with an NGO. Sometimes that's engaging with the educational institutions around you. And at its very core, we are helping those customers achieve that mission value. And that's what we're doing in Salesforce services and public sector. Anything you'd add, Larry?
It's a great answer.
Thank you. Just like we practice.
That's awesome. I appreciate it. And that certainly provides context for the questions. And so I just want to highlight the fact that though this is a session about government consulting, obviously there's a ton of experience here on the call from a wide variety of different roles, but also a wide variety of previous backgrounds. So if you have questions about how to transition, because we do have quite a few military folks on the call and on the panel that have transitioned, please feel free to ask those as well. Again, this is your session. Doesn't have to just be the questions that I come up with. You are free to interject. And I'm just going to share a couple more of the profiles for our panel in chat, and then we'll head on to the next question.
All right.
So just a quick follow-up. Broadly speaking, can you talk a little bit more about who your typical customers are from both a state and federal perspective, just so the folks on the call can understand like who you deal with and who you're serving on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, so this is Larry. What I think is interesting is, so I've got the military sector, which includes aerospace and defense and the military services and the Pentagon. And what's interesting is we sort of have this Mars and Venus challenge because Salesforce is very much a commercial entity. And if you go out into the commercial sector, everyone knows Salesforce. Like my cousin runs a small refuse management company in Columbus, Georgia. And when I joined Salesforce, he's like, oh yeah, I use Salesforce. He's got a company of like 20 people. Everyone uses Salesforce. But if you go into walk the halls of the Pentagon and talk about Salesforce or customer relationship management, the Pentagon sort of says, well, we don't have customers and we don't do sales. So why would we need Salesforce? So what's interesting is how our platform is being used to enable all kinds of processes across the government. So in my patch, we do a lot with military recruiting for all the services, for civilian personnel, onboarding, hiring, hire to retire. So that there's a lot of those logistics, personnel functions that our platform addresses very, very effectively. But sometimes we don't know how to speak the language of the government, and the government don't know how to speak the language of Salesforce. Mm-hmm. And so what's really exciting for this audience is we really need people that can bridge that gap between the Salesforce commercial world but also understand our customers' environment and what our customers' needs are.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a great point. And that's why I made the initial move from consulting to solution engineering, was because they're growing the Department of Defense team within global public sector pre-sales. And we're looking for someone who had Navy background, which I do, to be able to help the Navy start to replace some of their legacy solutions, things that are better, like Salesforce. So awesome. I appreciate the added clarification. And so, I work with the government, within the government sector as well, and we have certainly unique challenges due to the fact that the public sector is, as you mentioned, Larry and Courtney, a unique industry. So given the nature of your customers or constituents, depending on the nature of the customer that you're dealing with, could you describe some of the challenges that you've faced in supporting these sectors? Are there unique challenges that you can share that maybe some of the other business units don't experience due to the nature of the mission and the work that you're doing?
I think one that jumps to mind is we have customers in the space who are anxious to move to an agile development model, but are not well enabled within these agencies to manage and lead that type of work. So if I'm thinking about big industry related challenge that is a success inhibitor, that's a big one for us. So I think as we think about walking into these customers and these engagements, we want these customers to be agile, because our objective is to not build software like the government used to do in a waterfall way and invest $20 million over 3 years. Our objective is to deliver value fast and to rapidly connect our agencies and our customers with the citizens and the constituents that are needing the services. We want to do that quickly. And so we are very much an MVP mindset, deploy an MVP, iterate on it, work in an agile way, be open to change, be open to changing requirements. And that's hard for the government, right? Just full stop. It's hard to contract that way. And it's hard to operate that way because there's so much process built into a federal IT shop. It just makes that challenging. So like that's one for me that's a big one.
Awesome.
Team would love your thoughts about others.
Yeah. Maybe something you faced on an implementation project. Go ahead, Lauren.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head, Courtney. I think a lot of times being that innovation is one of our key values. This is at the core of who Salesforce is and Salesforce Professional Services is. We can sometimes move a little bit quicker than government is able to do. So I think sometimes that can be a challenge in learning to work within the confines of how quickly government can move is difficult, but it's a good challenge to have. So we're able to come in and innovate. So with every challenge, I think there's a bright side to that. And we're able to innovate at a pace like maybe they haven't, maybe we have to slow down a little, but this is moving quicker and we're enabling them to move quicker than they ever have before. So again, a challenge, but a good challenge to have, I think.
Yeah. And I think we see the spectrum. We see, I will say, newer agencies like the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau that's only a decade old, born out of the Dodd-Frank Act, and they hired and built that agency out of industry and out of the FinServ industry. And that is an agency that is equipped to move in a more agile way because that's how it was crafted. And so I think we see all ends of that spectrum. So for every customer, we have to look at, we know what they're trying to get to, and we need to help them do that in a way that feels comfortable in their environment. And like, there is very rarely going to be, we very rarely can deploy a pure agile methodology just the way we want. We have to make time for security reviews and stage gates and centers of excellence and all of that. And we weave that into our process. It's kind of the fun of how we make it work, but it's definitely one of our challenges. Justin, you got your hand up.
Yeah, I want to jump on that because I run into that every day. I work specifically with nonprofits, as you mentioned, Courtney. And one of the fascinating things about my role is, given that I've worked with so many different types of customers, and Salesforce is such a developed platform, a lot of times I'll come to customers and say, well, this is the best practice, or this is what I see everyone else doing, when they're often in an agile mindset of, hey, we hired this vendor to do a job, knock it out, vendor, do what we ask, meet our current business process. And we have to come in and say, gently and thoughtfully, you might want to rethink this. Here's why the software does this. Here's what everyone else in your industry is doing. And so, I'd say the most challenging thing in my career has been developing a set of soft skills to go alongside the technology. Yes. To kind of nudge the customer to step forward, and especially in some of these slower moving industries, that's not something that is comfortable for them. And I'll share with this group, what has been the best piece of advice in my consulting career is you will be most successful if you convince the customer it was their idea. And that takes a while, but nobody wants someone telling them what to do and just going and doing it. It's like, figure out ways to be nuanced, be thoughtful, put ideas in people's heads, plant seeds versus, just directly tell someone to change. That tends to work better in the long run.
Yeah, that's great advice, Justin. I love that. I know Hugh's got his hand raised, and then we'll take a question. Actually, we've got a couple questions from the audience, so we'll get to those after Hugh's comment.
I was just going to add on to the aspect of slow moving government processes. The inverse of that I've seen is that regulatory changes can also come down fairly quickly and with a bit of ambiguity that you have to work through as you're running through the process.
Yep. Very good point, yeah.
Appreciate that. Thank you so much. What we'll do here is field a couple questions from the audience. So Carrie's got a question, and then we'll go to Lindsay's question after that. Carrie asks, what are some ways you gain the hearts and minds of leadership that has been doing things the same way forever? How do you break them out of that habit pattern, that mindset, essentially?
So I was just answering this in the chat, but I'll say it out loud for everyone. One great thing that we do, and David Albright, who's on the screen, is a huge enabler of this, is we do a lot of demos, because many of our customers, because they're so far out of sort of the state of the art of commercial software, they really can't even conceive of what a modern software platform can do. And I was in a meeting recently with a senior Army general, and his CIO was in the room, and he said, well, I don't understand why I could use you because I have Microsoft SharePoint. And it's like, how do I even describe to you how awful Microsoft SharePoint is when that's all you know?
Yeah.
But demos help a lot, and David Albright's a great example of someone who does excellent demos to show that off.
So spot on. I think another strategy that we find successful is to let them hear it from someone else that's not us, that looks like them. And so customer to customer connection is a huge way to help the government see, yes, it's working at the White House. Yes, it's working at CBP. Yes, it's working at FDIC, right? Yes, it's working at Navy. And I think when you can have them connect in that way and hear it from the field, so to speak, and from up here, that's always a good strategy too. We've got a huge ecosystem of government customers, and we love to connect them.
Yeah, the customer success story is definitely effective for my end of the business as well, the pre-sales. And I'll just add before I turn it over to Lauren for her comment, and I see we also have some raised hands. I guess, Carrie, from my perspective, we do a lot of convincing the customer that they don't want digital translation. What they really want is digital transformation, because what they're often asking for is, hey, can you take this really horrible solution set and then put that in Salesforce? And we're like, we could do that, but why would you want us to? Let us help you reimagine the realm of possible and do things smarter. So that's part of being that trusted advisor, that guide through the process that I think Courtney, Larry, and the rest of the team are talking about. But over to you, Lauren.
Yeah, thank you. All right, so the only thing I wanted to add was it's really the secret to everything in life is trust. Trust. That is how you come in and are able to build that trust where your client is going to be listening to you. Now, you can't come in green and say, Salesforce does this and has a historical standing. They don't really care about those things. They care about how much you are in their corner, really, how much you care about their solution and their success at the end of the day. So if you're wanting to challenge a way of thinking, you must first build trust. And sometimes it takes a little while. So trust is that's the secret of life.
That's so beautifully said, Lauren. Thank you.
Yeah, one of our core values. So in the order of hands raised, we'll go Hugh, then Dennis, then Cece. Over to you, Hugh.
Actually, I think Lauren kind of covered where I was going to go. From as a solution consultant in the weeds, I have found that there is almost, or at least in my experience, there's very rarely a situation where you come in and say, yes, we can do this for you. And they say, great, here's a blank check, do what you want to do. It's more a matter of demo. Okay, great. That looked awesome. Can you also do this? Yes, I can do that. And then another demo and another demo. And eventually they develop that trust that Lauren was talking about, where now when you say, you could do it that way, yes, but that's probably not the greatest idea. How about we look at doing this? And they're far more amenable to those solutions at that point.
Yeah, great point, Hugh. Thank you for sharing that. Dennis, comment.
Yeah, thanks, David. And to piggyback right what Hugh was saying, just bringing that, that experience and that, everybody on here, especially those folks who have transitioned to the military, you're bringing like a different perspective, right? Like when I pitch to the, when I'm a solution consultant, but I help with some of the sales pitches with the Coast Guard and some of the demos that like what David does, and you have such rich experience, and if you can say, hey, I've seen what great things this platform can do and how it can, like you said, not just translate, but transform your business processes into things that are more efficient, more functional, better user interface, and better user experience, that goes a long way with the customer. And when I talk to, half the time I'm pitching to the Coast Guard, it's somebody that I've already built a relationship with. And so hey, this 30-year-old or 30-year veteran of the Coast Guard who's a salty old E9 can see the value in this. That goes a long way, so don't take that and kind of put that feather in your cap as well.
Yeah.
The old crusty Master Chief make keyboard work.
It's that instant credibility for sure.
Absolutely.
Cece, over to you. And then we'll go to Justin, I think, had his hand after that.
I think everyone covered it so beautifully. Definitely, it's about establishing trust. Thinking about it from after we've gotten the deal and we're working the project, it's important to keep that trust up and keep that maintained. And I think the best way we do that is by maintaining transparency and by being consistent as we continue to go along, so they can see, that we're bringing that value as well. So I think everyone pretty much covered what I was going to say, but we also have to think about, once the project's going, how we're keeping that going to get that return customer and being a trusted advisor, because they look to us.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so true, Cece. I think it's, government issues a big 100-page RFP and asks for a thing. And what we want to do is deliver value. And so what this whole team you're hearing from today does when they land on the ground with that customer is we have this conversation out of the gate. What are you trying to do, right? How can we help you be successful? What is that mission? If we rally around that, and that is the thread and the heart of everything we do, we're going to be successful, and so will they. And that's a conversation that we have to have, right? And that builds the trust that everyone's talking about, and that gives us a mission to rally around. And so that's a super, super important point.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like your point, Cece, about consistency being foundational to trust. Very much believe that as well. Over to you, Justin.
Yeah, two tactics that I've used, back to the persuading executives point, two tactics that I've used throughout my career. Just like Salesforce, we all have V2 moms, and they all ladder up, and we all have bosses, and we all have goals. In these organizations, they all have bosses as well. So what is top of their V2 mom? What are their priorities for a year? It is easy with big projects and big complex projects to just talk about a million different things. But if you're trying to persuade an executive, try to hone in on what they need to report to their bosses about. One kind of silly way I do this is I work in Marketing Cloud, and there's some Einstein in Marketing Cloud. It's not very robust. It's pretty superficial, but we put in talking points in a lot of our demos around, we're using Einstein artificial intelligence, because we want our executives and our VPs to all be saying to their bosses, hey, did you know we're using Einstein artificial intelligence in Marketing Cloud? And it may not be the most fantastic AI ever, but it's there. It's a talking point. It's something that they can move up to their leadership. And then the second tactic is, if you have FaceTime with that executive, ask them what their number one problem is early on. And people can't help you. They'll tell you immediately what's keeping them up at night or what's bugging them, and they can't help it. And then that's what you can hone in on. You can build your solution. You can build your messaging around that number one problem to make sure you're speaking to that.
Yeah, I love those best practices. So what we'll do here is I know Charles is after Iris, but we'll take Charles first, and then Iris, you can close us out for this particular topic, and then we'll move down the list of our questions, because we do have other questions to go. So Charles and then Iris.
I want to piggyback on really everybody, because I think it all paints the same picture. With the government type projects, the bottom line isn't the same as it is for other businesses. What is their value? Where is their value? A lot of times they don't even know exactly what that is when they decide to renew their whatever software that they're wanting to acquire from the Coast Guard. See, 20 years is what happens. But a lot of times it can be something like time, manpower, force multipliers to be able to do more in less time to accomplish XYZ mission. And the second being that I think the trust piece comes in when they see from a consultant standpoint that we're not there to just build exactly what they want and walk away. We we have an invested interest in their business processes, whether or not they've mapped those out previously or not. Sometimes that's part of it, is to help them map out what their business processes are, find inefficiencies, and fill those gaps. And I think that consultant client relationship builds a whole lot of trust moving forward.
Excellent point, Charles. Thank you for that. So Iris, question or comment, and then we're going to head down the question list with Lindsay's question, and then Carrie had another great question as well.
Okay, well, first of all, thank you all so much for being here. What an incredible lineup you have again for us, David. I'm loving this. So my question is a little bit tied into this, but on the flip side, because I present to like the transitioning service members, and I get asked often, are these Salesforce positions, are they just entry-level positions? And I have a tough time answering. It feels like if we can get some of these leadership transitioning service members into these consultancy roles to help with understand the process to the other side, we would get a lot further. But I don't know how to answer those questions, like how do their skills transfer into a Salesforce role? Would they have to start in an entry-level position? And I know the answer is no, but I don't know the best way to convince them, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. So, and Dennis, I may pick on you, so heads up. Salesforce services reorganized about 6 months ago into industry-specific verticals. And we aligned not only our sales teams, but we aligned all of our consulting experts that way as well. And the reason that we did that was because we wanted to show up at our customers with an industry-specific lens. This goes all the way back to what Larry was talking about at the top of the call, which was how we show up with the customers and an understanding of their business, right? In a way that speaks to them, that's not commercially focused, but that addresses appropriately how the government moves and how the government works, right? And how those organizations operate. So all of that said, we have a really diverse recruiting strategy in public sector delivery at Salesforce. And it is not just about hiring talent into the middle upper tiers of talent that know Salesforce really well. We are also looking at hiring industry experts and teaching them the platform. And so, Dennis, we brought you on hot out of retirement, fresh into us, and we did not start you at the bottom. And that's in a recognition of your accomplishments in your career. Was it all on the platform? No, but that's not the only thing we're using to decide where you land in the organization. It is the whole consultant. It is the whole human that brings the goodness to the customers. And so, and Larry, I know you've got a perspective on this too, and just kind of industry. And then Dennis, please feel free to share your experience.
Yeah, so the reason I'm at Salesforce is I helped to implement Salesforce for Army recruiting 15 years ago. And so got some experience with the Salesforce product and with the people, and had a good understanding of how to translate government needs into Salesforce capabilities. And so I'm still learning every day. I think if you're not willing to start from scratch and work really hard to learn something new, then that is a barrier. But if you're willing to roll up your sleeves and work hard and adopt new skills, no matter how old you are, like I'm 51, then there's certainly a place for you here. And just as Courtney said, we can really use people who understand that customer context.
Yeah, that's invaluable.
Yeah, and Iris, it's such a great question, right? I had the same 2 years ago. I was staring down the barrel of retirement, and my history is I small unit leader, boat driver, and the victim of a bunch of horrible data systems, over that long period of time, right? So, I mean, we probably all share some of that. So, a transitioning service member, if they start taking an interest in this, you already have some inherent skills and experience that you bring to the table, no matter if you were here for 4 years or 30 years. Every 2 to 4 years, you've had to change jobs. You've had to move to a new location. I've had, over my Coast Guard career, change jobs literally every 2 to 4 years, and it was never really the same job. Different people. So the level of adaptability that you have as a transitioning service member, or a military spouse who's transitioning with their service member, a lot of people severely underestimate that level of adaptability, because every place you've gone, you've had to learn a new environment. but you also had to learn new technical skills. And so to Courtney's point, they're hiring the whole person. And that's what I felt like when I made the transition. I had a great mentor in Jacqueline Figueroa. She's on the line here, and she's actually been in one of the office hours before. And, just seeing how they approached, with doing an agile methodology and help us think beyond our limitations. I mean, there's some really inspirational things there that said, wow, this is great. I get to be at the front end of making people's experience better using whatever data system it happens to be. And I can, and then as I started, going through Trailhead Military and through Vet Force and getting, work for certification, you start to realize, despite all the doubts that you have, just, you start networking, you start talking to people, that's why this is so great, David, is we get to kind of, take these, learn from these other perspectives and these other experiences, just how much a transitioning service member and a transitioning, service member spouse, you've had to do so many hard things over either a short career or a long career, that all these soft skills that you bring to the table and the sort of the whole person, and you've gotten to meet lots of people from different backgrounds. I mean, there's just, I could go on and on about this, obviously. So really it's sort of cementing that idea in their head that they have what it takes to make this transition, period, end of story.
Yeah, 100%. Over to you, Hugh.
I was going to add that I think part of the psychological hurdle, it may go back to a similarity what we were talking about before with government agencies not really understanding the Salesforce nomenclature and how can a sales process apply to them. Well, the same thing goes for someone that is transitioning. As someone in the military, you're dealing with ambiguity, you're dealing with rapid changes, with adaptability. The way Dennis spoke about having to, having to completely change your job every couple of years. Yeah, accelerate that to different project. The problem is that the terminology gets lost in translation. So if as a coach or a guide, you can help them make that translation in their heads, and that will help them, one, realize they can succeed, two, help them with their resume building and interviewing skills, and three, help them with networking as well.
Yeah, it's so true. And it doesn't just apply necessarily to transitioning service members and spouses, but anyone transitioning from a different career path into a new career path. That skills translation is so difficult. And that was the hardest thing that I faced, was figuring out what I was going to say on my resume, my LinkedIn profile. Ultimately, I paid someone to think of that for me. So there is value in having someone who's a professional take charge of your resume and create something that makes sense and communicates value to civilian employers or employers within that current industry that you're going for. So just keep that in the back of your mind. So heading back into the chat here, we'll take them slightly out of order. Lindsay asks a question very similar to Iris's, so you guys must have had a mind meld going on. And then Larry kind of comes in and asks a follow-on, so we'll kind of smush them all together. Lindsay asks, how important is past or recent PubSec experience to your teams? And I think we talked about that, and it's extremely important, right? Because that's the instant credibility and the business. She goes on to ask, do you find any skill sets or experiences, specific ones, that are super valuable when bringing on new team members? And I'll combine that with Larry's question, two-part, that he asks, what base level of certifications do you need to be a proper consultant in GPS or global public sector? So skill sets and certifications.
Okay. Do any of my SoulCon folks want to walk through the search you found to be most helpful? Hugh?
I will say that for certifications, obviously admin, I believe the new BA certification that just came out is extremely helpful because of the fact that you are dealing with a lot of what that certification talks through is dealing with customers, and some of that is dealing with customers that are not used to the agile process. To earlier commentary, a lot of our customers are not, or they struggle going from waterfall to agile. As far as skill sets, I think adaptability is going to be your biggest one. Adaptability and drive are going to be your two largest skill sets that you need to bring to the table. Technology can be taught, drive cannot.
Cece, over to you.
I definitely agree with the skill sets, adaptability. Trying to think of how to word it, so I'll come back to that. For the certifications, definitely agree the BA one in particular is one that I think is particularly useful to me. Of course, admin, depending on where you're planning to go or what you'd like to do, then there's education cloud, there's nonprofit cloud. But I'm actually finding as I'm going through this journey that sales cloud and service cloud are coming up a lot more than I anticipated. So having those as a good base would be beneficial as well, and even potential for experience cloud, because depending on your customer, that may be something that they want to have. But don't listen to me because I get them for fun. So
So Sales Cloud is a great point, Cece. Is anyone here surprised that she said that? Does that surprise you? Okay, those that work for Salesforce, so you're cheating. I'm shaking your head no. So I think what's interesting is, so Larry, in your patch, you have some quasi-governmentals like Lockheed and Rockwell and some of those big defense contractors. That is a big piece of what we implement there. And so I think here's the cool part of public sector. I struggle to find a product that we don't touch somewhere. And I think that's why our consultants love working in public sector, because you have the ability to go deep into an industry, into a cloud. You also have the ability to go broad. Hey, I haven't touched marketing cloud. Hey, like I want to learn experience cloud. I want to learn more about, CRM analytics, like whatever it is, we're doing it somewhere with one of our customers. And so it's a particular industry, and it's unique in the way that we're doing a little bit of everything, which makes it really exciting. I'm being so naughty and not raising my hand, so I apologize.
No worries. We'll head over to, I think, Dennis, you had your hand raised. Did your comment get?
Yeah, I just pulled it down for a second, but Courtney hit on a couple things. Like our org is built on Service Cloud, but with a heavy emphasis on Experience Cloud, because we basically have 42 licensed users in our Service Cloud internal application, and then 23,000 users in our Experience Cloud application. So it's, there's some definite challenges when you're making, changes to the system, when you have to think about, okay, how do I configure this solution in the internal application versus, how do I do it in the experience builder, and understanding what the limitations of both those things are, and know that they don't always overlap very well. So, I'm brushing up on my Experience Cloud and doing a Service Cloud consultant cohort right now. So, but the admin cert is where I started.
Yeah, good foundational cert. Over to you, Justin.
Yeah, I'll just add the marketing cloud perspective, because it's a little bit sometimes off to the side. But a couple thoughts, and this isn't always a popular opinion, but my feeling is if you're interested in marketing, go all in on marketing cloud. And the two to start with are the marketing cloud admin and the marketing cloud specialist. I would say that those two are for anyone that has any kind of interest in marketing. After that, if you are a highly technically inclined person or have some developer tendencies, there's a marketing cloud developer certification that you can go for. It's hard. I'm not a developer, but it is absolutely in demand and needed. Highly technical marketing skill sets are very, very thin out there in the world. Going the other way, there's also a marketing cloud consultant certification, which is also very hard, but it's very broad, touches all parts of the platform, and also gets into consulting. So if you kind of want to really go to the top of the mountain in marketing cloud and see everything, you want to go for those first two, and then the marketing cloud consultant. And then there are two that, as the products evolve, are getting closer into marketing cloud. And those are one that I've heard brought up a lot already is Experience Cloud. They're starting to overlap a lot, experience and marketing. And then obviously commerce, which I've heard of a couple public sector use cases around commerce. I know higher ed is really getting big into commerce, but obviously commerce and marketing are hand in glove. So if I was looking at this and I had any inclination towards marketing cloud, those would be the certs that I would go for.
Perfect.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing the marketing cloud perspective, Justin. Over to you, Lauren, and then we'll take Hugh.
Yeah. Okay. So I just want to kind of piggyback on what everyone has said. What certs do you get? It really depends on where you want to go, really, because there's a developer path, there's a consultant path for our solution consultants, and there's an architect path. And for each of those, where I would really start is with, if you're coming into consulting and really not having any Salesforce experience, you need to be able to prove that you know Salesforce. So at the very minimum, get your admin certification. It's where I started. It's where really everyone starts, really. So get your admin certification. Another new one, just like you said, Cece, and many people have talked about, is getting that business analyst certification. What that's going to show us is that you have some knowledge in how to run discovery, how to do business analysis, and really how to consult. So that's what that is aimed for. And then really I would specialize from there, depending on which industry you're going to be in, maybe learning some of the clouds. But I would really start with those two. Again, that's admin and business analyst. And then I would also get an understanding of the Agile methodology, because then that'll show us you also understand how to work in an Agile environment. And so those are really the three that I think anyone should start with. Those are kind of the skills that you need to come into consulting and really any position and be very successful. Okay, over to you, Hugh.
Thank you, Lauren.
Actually, Lauren, you just said exactly what I was about to say, so I am going to cede the floor.
We yield our time to the gentleman in the upper right corner of my screen.
Appreciate the answers to the question. So essentially work on your foundational certs, and then you can either specialize if you say you want to go to marketing cloud, or if you want to stay with core, work on your cloud certs, sales cloud, service cloud. I'll just share the one that I found the most helpful, and I've got a couple certifications, was honestly, as a consultant back when I was, platform app builder. I love that cert. Process automation, how to build apps. I felt like that single cert helped me grow more than any other cert. A close second would be platform developer, which enabled me to have better conversations with the developers on our teams and help them out in a limited way when they were task saturated. So what we'll do here is, I see your hand, Dwayne. I want to get to Carrie's question, and then we'll circle back to you. Carrie asks, I'm assuming there are limitations with highly classified information. Is there a point where Salesforce is not a viable option? If so, how is Salesforce working to get past those limitations? Great question. And there were others that echoed that they were interested in that too.
So David, I'm going to start with this, and Courtney's tired of hearing me talk about this, but
Not true.
hire more clear talent. So today we operate at the IL4 level on GovCloud, which means we can handle PII, personally identifiable information, and controlled unclassified information. And so we have customers doing that today across the entire DoD and federal civilian sector. We also have some agencies that require secret clearances. Not that we're storing or processing secret information on our platform yet, but they require the consultants who are working in their space to have a secret clearance. So there's a current need for those clearances. We also we have a very aggressive roadmap, and Salesforce has made significant investments into the public sector and our ability to operate at every classification level in the public sector. And so we have a product roadmap that will roll out IL6 to operate at the secret level, as well as host Salesforce on JWICs to operate at the TS level, and even above that. And so right now, our bench of consultants who have active clearances is relatively shallow. And we even have, I think, an opportunity with Canada. So we need Canadian clearances now, of all things. So that's one thing I talk to Courtney about this all the time. Like, we need to build a pipeline of clear talent so that when the product is ready, we're ready to deliver the service.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not here today, but it's coming quickly.
Yep.
Yeah, so just a
I
quick-
will never get sick of you saying that. And I agree wholeheartedly.
Just a quick plug, if you're transitioning right now, it's worthwhile to spend the time, and it is a pain, to renew your security clearance so that when you get out, obviously it's going to last you a little bit longer, because it's harder if you let it lapse to then renew it, even though you've had it previously. So do the work if you want to work in government consulting or any other job for that matter where you need to have a clearance. I didn't do that.
It makes onboarding to a project a whole lot easier as well.
Yep.
It took like 3 days for me to get reciprocity back that I was good to go.
Yep.
Can I answer?
Right.
So Raj just put a question in the chat that follows on my answer. Where can cleared individual get consolidated information on applying for jobs that require a clearance? What I would suggest, Raj, is that you don't limit your search to jobs that require a clearance. If you have a clearance, I've just told you, you now know that we need people with clearances. That doesn't mean we would only necessarily employ you in places that need a clearance. So what we'd love to do is get some people on board who have the clearance, get them some experience on just our regular engagements. But then once we have all of our product in place to deliver in the cleared space, we have people that have both the clearance and the government context and the experience on the platform.
Yeah, thanks for the follow-up, Raj, and for the answer, Larry. Appreciate that. Dwayne, over to you for a question or comment.
Yeah, my question is, doing Salesforce development in e-commerce, is that like something that's going to be big, or is it already big?
In the government space, in the public sector space, no. More broadly at Salesforce, absolutely. And so, I did say we touch everything. We have kind of a narrow niche for that particular piece in public sector, but it's definitely something in our commercial business that's in high demand.
Thanks for the question, Dwayne. And Raj, you've got your hand raised. Over to you. Yep, we got you.
Sorry. Well, thank you, first of all, for being here. My question to Larry earlier was, the reason I ask is because I'm scared that it will lapse. So my focus was on finding a clear job is to kind of avoid that situation. Because, if you lapse, then you have to go through another reinvestigation and all of that. So that's why I'm interested. But I'm definitely keeping an eye out for the larger pool of all the jobs that are available. But thank you for answering that.
Yeah, thanks, Raj. I think today you won't see, will you see job recs at Salesforce that list your clearance as a requirement?
No.
I don't think so.
No, you won't. And then remind me, there is a season whereby it doesn't have to be picked up immediately. Is it 2 years? Typically 1 to 2 years?
I know it's at least 1 year.
Okay.
And Raj, just like I'm in that situation. I joined 2 months ago. I've got a TS SCI, it's active. Salesforce is not currently holding it. I'm confident that within a year we will have the product and the requirements. I don't know if you know all the background, but you have to have a contract that requires the clearance, and that grants your facilities clearance. It's a big ball of wax, but we're melting that ball of wax as we speak.
We've got another
Awesome,
follow-up
thank you.
question. Thank you, Raj. Another follow-up question on the security clearance topic from TD. And he says, I have a TS/SCI clearance and wouldn't mind using it in a Salesforce role, but would those roles require you to reside where SKIFs are located? I am dead set on living in the Pacific Northwest, so.
I think the short answer is I don't completely know. If you were going to use your TS/SCI and we had a customer that required that, and you were actually processing that level of information, then I think, yes, you'd have to be doing that work in a SKIF.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not to say we couldn't employ you on projects that require a secret clearance, because you have above that, just to handle PII.
Mm-hmm.
So the people that work on PII for our federal clients are not necessarily working on site. But as we move into the TS and higher levels, that will require predominantly on site work.
Awesome. All right, just scanning chat for questions. It looks like I think we've worked through everyone's questions, so we'll head back to my question list.
Viviana had one in there.
Oh, missed that one. Do you want to call it out, David?
Sure. From the customer side, and this is really for the solution consultants, from the customer side of tech solutions in DoD, I've seen implementations go poorly because individuals involved in the discovery phase were gone by the time implementation time came around, and the new individuals had little context or buy-in. What are ways to ensure sustainable success from pre-sales all the way through to delivery when the client reps were working with many changes throughout the process? So really kind of talking about the handoff between pre-sales and post-sales, it sounds like.
That's a great question. Thanks for catching that, David.
No worries.
So our sales and our delivery organizations are tightly aligned at Salesforce. And because of that very reason, we are trying to stay connected from first conversation all the way through project closeout to make sure that we as leaders and we as teams are all rowing in the same direction. We're all sharing the same information. We are all aligned in the vision. We're aligned in the strategy. And so it's a big focus for Larry and I and the teams that we're leading to make sure that we're keeping that connection.
Awesome. Let's see. I think Hugh, you were next, and then Charles.
So another aspect of that is massively helpful is documentation. So on Karma, the project I'm working on, we have been going since 2019. There have been several roll-offs, roll-ons, whatnot like that. And when I came on, one of the ways that I was able to get up to speed as quickly as I could was due to documentation and that repository. And that helped with, along with the leadership, that helped with all the buy-in and being able to make sure that there wasn't going to be a fall off in what I was able to provide to the customer just because I was new.
Yep. Good points. Charles.
Well, I was going to say lots and lots of documentation. I think that I go back and review, we use Jira for the project I'm on. I think I go back and review, Jira tickets and stories from, early 2021 almost on a daily basis. Because especially in the military, all those people are transferring every 2 to 4 years. And so decision makers are not the decision makers when it's time for the decision to actually be turned into action. So yeah, I think that's the key, documentation.
Yep. Yeah. So I think common best practice is document everything and then share those documents across that pre-sales to sales boundary. But I would say, in my experience, there isn't always necessarily like a firm dividing line that separates pre-sales from sales. I've been called back to support customers after the implementation is already complete, simply because I don't think they had a managed services contract in place. So they didn't have necessarily someone from Salesforce or the partner ecosystem that was helping them with their day-to-day. But I'm in the area. A couple of my AEs were in the area. So we drove up to Boston and went and talked to the recruiting district DO about his implementation of Salesforce, spoke with all of his sailors and kind of did an over-the-shoulder review of how they use it. And we provided some best practices on how they can get more value out of it by reducing some of the redundancies with the other tools they were using. Some of the features they didn't know about, we pointed those out. And so there isn't always that dividing line. Sometimes we'll reach across and continue to support that deal even after it's closed and implemented. It's all part of to Lauren and everyone else's earlier point, trust. Right.
Yeah.
So we've got, let's see, we've got a couple more questions in here. Make sure I get them in the right order. Dave will back me up if I get them wrong. Carrie asks, do you have one branch you tend to have more projects with versus others? I hear more about Navy. Does Army need to step up their game? I think that's true in all things. Army always needs to step up their game. Navy is where it's at, but I'll let the panel answer.
I think this is a question for Larry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just typing my answer in the chat. So we actually had pretty good penetration across all the services. I would guess there's probably the Air Force probably holds the most licenses today. That's a guess. We have one very big Army enterprise recruiting project ongoing and pretty significant opportunities in the Army as well, and Navy also. So go Army, beat Navy.
Yeah, I support responding to the chat, all services, of course. So we've got one more question. We've got about 2 minutes left. I think we've got time to answer it. Jason asks, I just dropped my retirement letter this week for June of 2023. Congratulations. What is a reasonable amount of time to complete my initial certifications and be available for a possible Salesforce position that may be available? Great question. I certainly have my thoughts, but I want to hear from our panel first. And I think if we're going in order here, Charles, then you.
Well, I think might be the newest person in this group that's done it. I started with Salesforce in May I actually had a conversation back in, I believe, November with Jacqueline, who is on the line, right after I got pulled in on the Coast Guard side of a project as a Coast Guard member, and just kind of interested in it. And she pointed me in the direction of Trailhead, and then introduced me to Dennis, who introduced me to Vet Force and the Trailhead military. And I was certified as an admin by January, interviewed in February, and started in May. So I would say that when you're ready to pull the trigger and apply, and that's probably the right time to do it. But it can, I'm not saying my case is the norm, but it worked out for me. I wouldn't change anything.
Yeah, thank you for the insight, Charles. I appreciate that. We'll hear from Hugh, and then and even though Lauren doesn't have her hand raised, I do want to hear from Lauren, because if you want to get your certification as fast as humanly possible, she's a good person to talk to. But over to you, Hugh.
I will say I've seen an entire gamut. I've seen folks that take a year to get certified. I've seen folks do it in 3 weeks. It's really just a matter of your personal pace, where you can allot your time, things of that nature. If you're single, have nothing else to do, live, breathe, and bleed Salesforce, you can probably do it within a month. Realistically, I would say probably somewhere around the range of 2 to 3 months ramp time before you're certified. And keeping in mind that certification means the fundamentals of Salesforce. That's not necessarily meaning that you're ready to go for a solution arc or something along those lines, but you're ready to, just like boot camp, you're ready to start learning the real world, how Salesforce works, type of deal.
Great point. And then we'll close it out with Lauren. And I do see some questions in chat. Unfortunately, we'll be out of time, but bring your questions to future sessions. We will get those answered. Also, reach out to our panel on social media with those questions. I'm sure they'd be happy to answer, because we don't want to leave those questions unanswered. Lauren, over to you.
Okay, so to close this out, I'll close this out with a little bit of a story. So as was said in the beginning of the call, I was in the Air Force as a linguist, but unfortunately, I was unexpectedly medically discharged when I was married to an active duty Marine. And so all of a sudden, I went from having this, what I considered was going to be a life of a career. I was going to be a lifer. Everyone thinks that. But I was going to be a lifer, and now I'm discharged. And what transferable skills do I have? And I really didn't know what transferable skills I had. And it was very hard for me. So we were moving a lot. We moved 8 times in 5 years. So I'm sure you all are familiar with that. But I couldn't find a job. And I was unemployed for about 3 years. And I had my first little boy, Carter. And I woke up and I said, something's got to change. I'm unemployed. I don't have gainful employment. My husband, we're moving all the time. Something's got to change. And so I learned about the Salesforce opportunity and really never looked back. So I think I just dove in. I had a newborn, so he was sleeping a lot. And when he was sleeping, I was studying just as much as I could. And Larry touched on it at the beginning of the call, and he said, you got to work, and you really do, right? This isn't something that you're going to just pick up on the side. You got to be focused. And I really focused in. And so I did not do it, like you said, Hugh, in 3 weeks, but I did get a job within 4 weeks of the first time I ever heard about Salesforce and logged on and knew what it was. So 4 weeks was my, I think it's a record, but I want you all to read it. And then an additional 4 weeks and I had my admin certification, but I went deep and I went very hard, very quick. So it can be done. You must be dedicated, and you really have to set this as your goal and say, I'm betting on this, and I'm going to bet on myself, and I'm going to learn as much as I can. So that is my story. You all go as fast as you can. Beat me. I want to hear about it.
Yeah, I love your story, Lauren, which is why I brought it up. And Justin brings up a good point in the chat. If you scroll up, you'll be able to see it. But essentially, there are tons of jobs out there in government consulting, as well as other areas of the ecosystem outside of Salesforce. So don't just limit your search to Salesforce. For example, I was a solution consultant for a partner firm for a year before Salesforce asked me if I was interested in coming on board there. So take a look at the partner ecosystem. Great way to get experience. And then if you decide to later, you could leverage that experience to work at Salesforce or for somewhere else in the ecosystem. Back to you, Larry and Courtney. I see your hand raised.
Yeah, so I just want to make a quick plug on something we haven't addressed. I spent almost 30 years in the Army and loved being in a mission-driven organization. And like Dennis said, I was the victim of lots of really bad software and lots of really bad process. What I love about Salesforce is, one, we can help customers that I care about. And so that there's very much a mission. And I'm convinced that our platform can transform the efficiency and effectiveness of so many awful ancient systems that the government is subjected to. The other thing I love about Salesforce is that I've never seen a commercial organization where the talk track about values and the values in practice are more aligned than they are at Salesforce. We talk about equality. We talk about values, and we don't just talk about them, we're measured on them, we live by them, and we financially invest in those things. And so I guess I've drunk the Kool-Aid a little bit, but this is an organization that I'm hugely proud to be a part of, and to associate, my good name and my good record with this organization. I feel really good about that. I just love being here, and it's exciting every day to get up and come to work.
Yeah, that's awesome, Larry. Thanks for sharing that. And yeah, I mean, that's what I tell folks often is I came for the tech and I stay for the community. And a big part of that community is the values that it's built upon, our 5 core values, which we do live every day. And that's right. That's why we're here right now. We're living those core values. So we'll go ahead and close it out for this week. But before we do, I want to say some thank yous. Thank you to Courtney, to Larry, Lauren, Justin, Cece, Dennis, Charles, and Hugh for spending time on your Wednesday evening to educate us about government consulting roles. It's been an awesome hour, and thank you for staying over. Really appreciated you jumping on the call and co-hosting the session.